Hey, welcome back to the K Cup, episode 14. We got an interesting show for you today. We're going to be talking about really a very serious and critical step to being a successful commercial construction contractor, or a GC, general contractor, and that is regarding qualifying your subcontractors for a project. And we're going to get into the why you want to do that, and you're going to bring out some highlights about that, and then after that we're going to offer some practical advice on the how to actually go about the process of qualifying a subcontractor. Before we do that, though, I want to get into a couple of external forces that are really making it necessary for us to do our due diligence and make sure that we're qualifying subs to prevent problems once a project starts. And the reason why is because both of these external forces are really applying a lot of downward pressure to our margins and profits in the industry, in the commercial construction industry. And so let's get into those first. The two issues that I want to discuss are labor and materials. So talking about labor first, we're about 10 years into the steady decline of labor in the construction industry. And it's kind of hit critical mass now because it's gotten to the point where, although these so-called labor brokers are out there that can get boots on the ground and can get warm bodies to a project, the problem that we're seeing is that there's a sharp decline in skilled labor. So you might get 10 guys to a project, but only one of them may hopefully have some level of skill for the scope that they're being sent there with, and then the rest of the crew that's there with them are merely acting as general laborers trying to support whatever this lead is doing there on the project. So, and we know that we've experienced this ourselves, and it ends up being very inefficient, and it just kind of puts a bottleneck in the progress of the project. So labor is a huge problem. The other problem about it is that it's at an all-time high. We're paying premium prices for really unskilled labor in a lot of situations. So that is the big picture of that is that it is obviously, with margins already pretty thin in the commercial construction industries, particularly in the competitive public bid sector, it's even putting more pressure on those margins and pressing them down even further. The other side of that is material suppliers, material producers for the construction industry underwent a lot of merger and acquisitions during the pandemic. So while everyone was kind of busy, dealing with the pandemic and all that stuff, a lot of these big corporations were acquiring smaller companies, and it's gotten to the point now where these companies have consolidated to the point where some of the normal fluctuations that we used to see with materials, they would spike during supply chain issue times, or where there was this supposed shortage of material, although there's probably tons of it sitting in the yard somewhere. But anyways, it could be manufacturer shortage, whatever. But during those times, we would see spikes, and then we would see a leveling off of those markets, and prices dropping, sharply, and a lot of times getting back to historic lows where they were months before all this happened. We haven't seen that with this latest phenomenon of material suppliers consolidating. Prices are staying pretty high, pretty firm in their current position, with no sign of really letting up. So when you put that together, labor, paying a premium for labor, and there being really a drastic shortage of skilled labor, and then you combine that with the higher cost of materials, in neither one of those problems having any light at the end of the tunnel in the short term, it really makes it just super important for general contractors to make sure they're qualifying their subs and preventing the preventable, making sure to the extent possible that once a project starts, you're not going to get into a situation where, now this subcontractor, because they're not performing and they're having issues, is now costing you a big slice of that already thin margin. So, anyways, those are the external forces that I wanted to bring out, because you're seeing the starting point is that we're already starting here with a lot of downward pressure on the heads of general contractors in this industry. And so now we're going to get into the nuts and bolts and talk first about why it's important to qualify your subcontractors as a general contractor. And then secondly, John's going to bring out some points about how you can actually go about this, what the process is for making sure that, you're doing your due diligence and you're having at least a good opportunity to hopefully have a successful project with the subs that you're going to, enter into the project with. So let's go ahead and get started about the why, John. Why do you see it being imperative that a general contractor qualifies their subs?
Yeah, I think that, obviously this is something I feel like we say on every show. Here we are saying it again, but, you know, you're really only as good as your worst sub.
Yeah,
Uh, and it's just true. I mean, you can have a job going really well and one sub can really kind of get it off.
hmm,
And not that you can always blame every issue on the job on a sub, but it can happen.
yeah,
So, you know, to me, one of the biggest reasons that it's the most important to make sure you're working with those qualified subs is just reputation.
hmm,
I mean, you spend a whole lot of time trying to build your reputation. In our case here, 17 years we've tried to build a reputation, and I feel like we've done a pretty good job. We have a pretty decent reputation as far as I know out there.
yeah,
But but one bad situation and it can go away like that.
yeah,
So when I think about reputation and who it's important to, I mean, I'm thinking about the client. You always want to be able to do repeat work with a client, so you
yeah,
need that reputation to be upheld.
absolutely.
You know, architects, engineers, people that refer work, and facility managers. If you can't keep a good reputation with those guys, they're not going to put another job in front of you. They're not going to put another opportunity out there,
Yeah,
and that's the lifeblood of our business. I mean, we need more opportunities. We need people to have confidence in us and what we do.
absolutely.
Uh, so that's big. Reputation for subcontractors. I mean, we want to be working with the best subcontractors. And if you continuously have jobs that are dragging or off schedule because you have a subcontractor that wasn't qualified, that's not managing their project and not
Yeah,
staying on top of things, if that happens a couple of times, all of a sudden some of your key subs may not be as interested in getting on a project that they know is going to be delayed or that they know is not going to hit the timeline.
yeah,
uh, so reputation's big in that manner.
hmm,
And just as important as all of those, your reputation for your company with your employees. I
yeah,
mean, in a big company, a lot of times employees don't know, that a sub was hired that was bad or whatever. They're just sitting in the monthly meeting and seeing that the company's not hitting its numbers,
yeah,
and all of a sudden, a couple of quarters in, they may be like, man, I don't think we're ever going to hit our numbers, and it's really just based on a few bad decisions or a few bad situations that could have been avoided.
yeah,
So to me, reputation is the biggest why, or the biggest reason for making sure you get qualified sub, because it really goes a long way in making a lot of this stuff make sense and hit your numbers and your margins and all this stuff.
yeah, for sure.
Uh, the other part of it is just reducing risk. I mean, as a general contractor, we're responsible for the job, and we bring in key subs to carry risk and do things on these projects that we don't know how to do.
Hmm,
And you've already alluded to it, and we've seen it, time and time again on a couple of projects where we hire somebody to do a job, and technically they know how to do it, but they have one person that knows how to do it,
yeah,
and they have a full labor force that really don't know what they're doing
yeah,
or what they're doing, and and that's an issue. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
bodies don't get it done,
That's right.
and it's just a big issue that we've seen more recently, a few times.
Yeah.
And then just job site conditions, safety, all that stuff goes hand in hand. Good subs are just going to make a huge difference.
Yeah, for sure. So those are some great reasons why you want to, qualify your subs. Reputation's huge. Risk is huge. You know, you read about risk in articles about the industry and you hear people talk about it, but when you live it and experience it, you see it unfold sometimes because a sub, like you said, is not, performing to their potential or, simply not qualified. And somehow we've gotten partnered with them. You see that risk unfold and it can affect, like, I think you'd mentioned bonding, when it comes to reputation with your bonding
Yeah,
company.
yeah, no, yeah. Bonding is huge. I mean, we've seen it time and time again, and I say time and time again. I mean, it's happened a time or two. Where a material supplier for a sub,
Yeah.
specifically the bigger companies that you kind of referred to earlier,
Hmm.
they've been doing this for a long time. They don't really play around. They go straight to the source.
Yeah.
So we've seen it to where we get our bonding companies reaching out saying, hey, what's going on this project over here? ABC, whoever is not paying their bill, and
Yeah.
we getting a notice. So at that point, we're scrambling, reaching out to material suppliers, trying to see what's going on, and
That's right.
uh, that's an important reputation to keep. That reputation that you have with your bonding company is important.
Hmm.
And even though, I mean, you may have paid all your bills, you may have everybody paid up. When they get that call or when they get in that notice, there's probably a little light bulb in their brain. It's like, okay, what's happening with Kelly Construction or what's happening with whoever? Why are we getting this notice?
Exactly.
And you want to avoid that as much as possible.
Absolutely. And I talked about at the beginning of the show about the downward pressure that we're seeing on margins from labor and materials. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that too, about, you know, how to protect the margin and why it's important. This is part of the why, really.
Yeah,
Why you want to qualify that sub. How does that, qualifying of your sub affect your margin stuff?
yeah. So we did talk about hitting the numbers and doing all that kind of stuff. So yeah, protecting the margins. I mean, as a general contractor, basically we make money on how long or how fast, how long does it take us to do it, or can we do it quicker?
Yeah.
And the length of the project is kind of where we make money.
Yeah.
I guess we bid it based on thinking it's going to take this amount of time. If we can do it quicker than that, we beat our numbers.
Yeah.
If it takes us longer than that, then we lose.
Yeah.
Uh, so a good sub can help keep this thing on schedule or even beat schedule, and at that point, we can start to make money. The other thing though, it goes back to reputation. I mean, when you're talking about protecting margins, it may lead to another job. I mean, if we go over here and we hit a home run with this client, then we may be able to do another job right behind it with them,
Yeah.
and go hit the margins on that one.
Yes.
But if not, if we don't go there and perform, then they may give that job to a competitor or somebody down the road, and now all of a sudden, we lost some revenue that was likely ours, and
Yeah.
it just didn't happen because the job didn't go as planned,
Yeah.
and we may have executed perfectly,
Yeah.
but that one situation uh, put us in a bad spot.
Yeah. It gives you a black eye.
And I don't want to sit here and think that we're putting all the bad stuff that happens on projects to subs and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
We're not doing that, but we're just talking about the importance of why it's important
Yeah.
to make sure you get that qualified sub,
Oh yeah.
because
Absolutely.
we all know that everything's not going to go perfect
No.
for sure. But
Yeah.
if you do your due diligence and you make sure you have qualified people, even situations that could be a little bit sticky usually turn out pretty decent.
Yeah.
But if not, then they can go really south.
Yeah. It's all about minimizing risk because, like we talked about, the margins are already thin. So we got to minimize as much risk as we can to keep what margin we are working towards winning by getting the project completed in the allotted time. So those are all great whys. Let's go ahead and talk about some nuts and bolts now about, so anyone that's out there thinking about being a GC or is a GC, and you want to know how do I go about qualifying myself? What are some of the things I can do to actually get to the bottom of things and come away with a warm fuzzy about working with this person or knowing that you need to go in a different direction?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that you're gonna want to do is, just review license, insurances, just the basic requirements like that. I mean,
Okay.
all your top tier subs are going to have all that kind of stuff taken care of.
Yeah.
They should be able to produce those kind of documents
Fast.
within, just very short amount of time after a request.
Yeah.
So, if you do that and they can't produce that fairly quickly, then that's the first red flag. But generally speaking, most of your good subcontractors are going to be able to provide that information fairly quickly.
Yeah.
And that's the first step. I mean, that's done real early on here in our office when we're looking at somebody new, and that's kind of the first step. Secondly, I like to go just to meet the team type deal. Like let's
Yes.
bring in the estimator, bring in the owner, maybe a PM. Let's see who we're going to be working with. Let's get a feel for everybody.
Hmm.
And our process kind of stopped there for a lot of years. I mean, we would bring in people, and once we got a good feeling about it, uh, we'd roll with it. But I think that, and you alluded to some of the other factors that's really hampered the industry and even the subcontractor world, just
Yeah.
material and labor.
Yeah.
So I really think that that's changed the game some, or it definitely has,
Seems
in the
like it.
subcontractor pool. But we've done those meetings a lot of times and had a lot of success with it. But I think what ends up happening, and we've seen this, once or twice, unfortunately, is where we have a sub that comes in and we have the meeting and it goes really well, and that these guys are good people or whatever, but these conditions that you're alluding to end up popping their head up in the middle of this job, and
Hmm.
it just makes it to where they can't perform.
Yeah.
Uh, and I was going to say a lot of times it's newer subs and that kind of thing, but I don't even really think that's the case. I mean, obviously newer subs are still learning the ropes and trying to get things in place, but it can
Sure.
happen to anybody.
Exactly.
But you know that first meeting, those first meetings have served us well, but we have seen that you know good people, bad things can happen.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
you really have to continue to do a little more due diligence and go a little bit beyond that first meeting. Uh, and that's what we found, and that's what we've kind of started to do. And there's other things you can do. I mean, I think a huge thing that you can do is reach out to that sub or ask them in that first meeting, like who are some of your suppliers? Like, give me your top 5 suppliers. I mean,
Yeah.
because you want to make sure you're requesting enough suppliers that you're really getting a good test, because if they're only giving you 1 or 2, they likely do business with these people all the time, and that's probably their go-to people. You want to make sure you get enough suppliers, and you could even just cold call some suppliers that they're probably doing business with. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not hard to know where electrical people are buying their supplies,
Yeah.
or where steel guys are getting their steel, or
Yeah. There's only so many
where plumber
sources.
guys are getting their plumbing material. It's not that hard to figure it out. So
Yeah.
just do a little due diligence and try to find out what their reputation is with their material suppliers. Uh, get some references as far as GCs. And again,
Hmm.
it's kind of the same thing. I mean, if you ask them for, you know, give us 5 references, you're probably going to get their 3 best GCs that they've never had an issue with. But you could do a little additional work, and maybe you've seen them on a job across town that you know who the contractor
Hmm.
was or whatever.
Yeah.
Like reach out to those guys and find out what's the story. I mean, were these guys good to work with?
Yeah.
Uh, Something that we definitely have started doing, and need to do a lot more of it, because it's really important.
Hmm.
Uh, and then another one is, and this one's sometimes a little more difficult to kind of get to, because you don't like to ask about it, but in
Sure.
this situation, I mean, business is business, and find out what their financial strength is. I mean, ask for some basic reports. You know, see how long they take to pay their bills, and just get a good what's their cash balance. I mean, can they operate on a job of this size or whatever.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think that's important in any job really, but I mean specifically if if you're connecting with a subcontractor for $600,000-700,000 on the job, I mean, it's going to be very important to know that they
It's a lot of
can
money.
secure material, that they
Yeah.
can keep everybody paid, they can cash flow it.
Yeah.
And I think the qualified subs that we're talking about, they don't mind sharing that information. They don't mind showing you the financial stability they have.
Yeah.
So I think that's an important deal, and specifically on a lot bigger jobs.
Yeah.
Is to have that understanding.
Yeah.
And that's just doing some very basic due diligence.
Yeah.
Uh, so in my mind, that's some of the bigger hows, if you will.
Yeah. Those are all great points.
One other one too that's big in our industry, and as our company's as our company has grown and we've kind of connected with bigger clients, you start to see it more and more. But safety, I mean, they want to know that you're going to come out and work in a safe manner. They want to know that you have a culture that's safe, and we try to do that as a general contractor, but that needs to be one of the questions that you're asking your subcontractors.
Yeah.
How concerned are you on safety? What do y'all do to create a safe work environment? And whatever information we get from them here in our office, we need to make sure that our field staff has that understanding of how they do it. Now, we know that our guys have our general safety rules and understanding in place, but it's going to help that they know how this subcontractor says they work, so that they can ensure that they're doing their part of the deal, and they're holding up to the safety culture that they kind of sold us on, if you will.
Sure.
During the early process of selecting the sub. So safety's huge.
Yeah. Yeah. Safety. I mean, I can see where that could be a huge time suck on the project for our superintendent that's on the job. If he's got to manage a subcontractor's team because they're not working safely and they're not wearing their PPE, where and rather than doing other things to help move the project along, he's basically now relegated to being the babysitter and the safety manager for a subcontractor. So you want to get that straight in the beginning too, and get a feel for their culture about safety and their attitude towards it. Is it something they laugh off, or is it something that they understand is a serious matter and can have repercussions if you're not safe on the project? So those are some great how-tos. I like the basics. Do your due diligence, licensing, permitting, things like that. Meeting the team, huge. Get a feel for who's actually going to be out there running the job, and you just see what their attitude's like, and if they're serious about their business, and do they have a sense of urgency about getting projects done, and are they goal oriented when it comes to wanting to meet their marks and get the project done so that they can move on to another job like we want to do,
Right.
And then calling this references, particularly with suppliers. Like you said, when you get into a contract where a sub has a $500,000, $500,000 scope, for a mechanical aspect of the job or something, it's a lot of money.
It is,
and it's not something you want to just say, I feel pretty good about it, and just
right.
move on from it. You need to do a little due diligence and make sure that this is really going to happen and doesn't leave you holding the bag. Again, like you've talked about it as far as the need, why to protect or qualify your subs. That margin is always there. That's like our baby that we're trying to protect and get through that project in one piece. And all these different things you talked about are all potential threats to the margin. And you just can't bear up under some of those things as far as if they come to fruition or whatever, or turn out to be a reality, then we know the result of that, and that's not making money.
Right.
We're not out there to practice. We're out there to make money. So,
Right.
and making money is not a bad thing. Some
Right.
people think that's a bad thing, but that's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. That's what pays the bills, keeps the lights on, and of course we know as GCs we put a lot of other people, to work.
Right.
So it's important that we make money and stay in business and be able to do that. So
Right.
protect that margin at all costs. So, anyways, any parting thoughts about the importance of qualifying your subcontractors?
Well, one thing that kind of hit my brain while you were talking, and this is really not a how or a why, but it's kind of like, how do you end up in that situation sometimes, or
Yeah.
how have we found ourselves in that situation, with an unqualified sub? And,
Yeah.
a lot of times it might go down, go back to like, man, we need a job, and you end up using a number that you probably knew was maybe a little low,
Yeah.
or a sub that you didn't really know didn't have they didn't have a reputation because maybe they're new or for whatever reason.
A lot of pressure.
I would just say, don't let that situation drive you into a bad situation.
Yeah.
If it means you're going to make a little less on a job, you have to use a little higher number, or a more qualified sub. Have that thought process and kind of run through it before you just go put yourself in a bad situation, because making a little less money in the beginning, or planning for a little less money in the beginning, may be a better situation than planning for pretty decent money, working with a risky sub, because almost always that risky sub is going to end up biting you in the behind. The project's going to drag on.
Yeah.
You may have to cover some material costs. You may have to cover something that maybe they damaged somebody else's work or whatever.
Yeah.
So just consider that in the beginning.
Yeah.
If it feels like a red flag, it's probably a red flag. And go through this process and make sure you have the green light.
Yeah.
With a sub.
For sure. You touched on something there that could really be the subject of a whole show itself. But I think it's really important just to briefly mention is that, like you're saying, don't get yourself in a situation and be tempted to take a number from a subcontractor that your gut's telling you is probably not a good situation. And just think if across the industry people practice that, the margin probably wouldn't be that thin. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I mean, truthfully, trickles down. This is not just necessarily leadership in the company. You know what I mean? It's trickling down to, your estimators. I mean, if an estimator's feeling pressure, they hadn't closed a job in a while or whatever.
Yeah.
That might be a call that they make. So we're just caution against it.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, of course, I had to cough right at the end of this
that's
episode.
No that's all good.
That must be the sign to quit. We've said enough. Anyways, thanks for coming back and joining us for another episode. We're glad you're here. Hope that you found some value talking about this subject of qualifying subcontractors. It's definitely something that we continue to work on here at Kelly Construction Group. We know that it's an important metric that needs to be an important aspect of how you conduct business as a general contractor. And if you are a subcontractor watching this, know that we're paying attention to this because it's important. We also understand the challenges that you're up against. We know that you definitely in the trades are being affected by the labor crunch and the lack of skilled labor. So we understand that, but the best way to remedy that and to avoid problems that this could produce is to communicate that, and let's talk about it. Let's be upfront when we have that meet the team time together. Let's talk about the challenges with your labor and your team and stuff like that, so that we can approach the job realistically, have realistic expectations, and maybe allow for that. And by doing that, actually are protecting our margin instead of letting something blow up into a problem that's unforeseen. So anyways, hope you enjoyed the episode. We'll be back here again next week with episode 15. Hope you come join us. We are now syndicated to several different podcasts, so you can check out the K-Cup on Spotify, Apple, just a plethora. I think there's 15 podcasts out there now, and we're syndicated to all of them. So check us out if you don't want to watch the the video version, you can definitely listen to some of these episodes and get some, some business insights that might help you if you're in the construction industry, whether you're a subcontractor, a material supplier, a commercial real estate broker, whatever. There's some quality or valuable content there that you might benefit from. If anything, you just gain the insight of a general contractor and kind of get a feel for where they're coming from, and that can't hurt. So, anyways, thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you again in a week. Adios.
Adios.